Your existence is a complete accident. If a certain shrimp hadn't gone extinct 500 million years ago, there would be no fish, no birds, no apes, and no you on this earth. Scientists say its extinction gave vertebrates the chance to rise. In other words, you're able to sit here scrolling through your phone because that shrimp died back then. But what's even more terrifying is that, while its extinction gave humanity a chance, today, humanity is walking the exact same path toward extinction. It is the Anomalocaris. But if you lived in the Cambrian period and heard those two words, you would have only one reaction: swim for your life. Just how powerful was it? 500 million years ago, creatures in Earth's oceans were mostly only the size of a fingernail. No eyes, no claws, and no shells. Everyone just got by absorbing nutrients from the water. No one ate anyone else. The entire ocean was a peaceful nursing home. Then the Anomalocaris appeared. At 2 meters long in that era, it was like a gray wolf breaking into a village of sheep. This wasn't just hunting. This was a dimensional slaughter. But its size wasn't even its most terrifying feature. In 2020 in Australia, paleontologists unearthed an incredibly well-preserved Anomalocaris head fossil. When scanned with a high-precision scanner, everyone present fell silent. Inside each of its eyes were 28,000 independent lenses, arranged in a perfect hemispherical array. Think about it. The phone camera you use now has tens of millions of pixels, and you're proud of it. But 500 million years ago, through biological evolution, the Anomalocaris created a pair of Ultra HD wide-angle cameras. Even more frightening, these eyes could track moving targets in multiple directions simultaneously and calculate the prey's speed and distance in real time. In that era, most creatures were blind, but the Anomalocaris basically had full map vision. If you hid in a rock crevice, it saw you. If you burrowed into the sand, it saw you too. To it, the entire ocean was like playing with a map hack. But eyes alone weren't enough. In 2023, scientists used supercomputers to simulate the Anomalocaris' hunting movements and discovered a breathtaking detail. The time it took for its two hunting appendages to open and snap shut was only 0.02 seconds. It takes you 0.1 seconds to blink once, meaning before you could even react, it had already completed 5 lethal strikes. Each appendage was lined with 14 sharp spikes, like a precision-engineered bear trap. Once prey was caught, there was no escape. The toughest creatures back then were trilobites, covered in hard outer shells, the armored warriors of that age. But the Anomalocaris grabbing one was like you crushing a potato chip, a single crunch, and it was pulverized. But what truly shocked paleontologists wasn't just how well it could fight, but that it could actually team up. A 2021 fossil excavation in the Kali biota of Guizhou, China, once again redefined our understanding of it. Multiple Anomalocaris fossils were found arranged in the same layer and direction, suggesting they might have been hunting organized, with a division of labor to corner a swarm of trilobites. Some were responsible for driving them from the perimeter, some blocked the flanks, and others waited specifically on the prey's escape route to deliver the final lethal blow. 500 million years ago, a shrimp had already learned tactical cooperation. When this discovery was published, the global paleontological community was stunned. Because this means the Anomalocaris wasn't just the earliest apex predator. It might also have been the first animal in Earth's history to learn teamwork. Imagine you are a trilobite. You manage to escape from one Anomalocaris' mouth with great difficulty. You take a breath, turn around, and 4 more are waiting for you. That moment of despair, you can feel it even across 500 million years. For 500 million years, you can still feel it. Just like that, the Anomalocaris ruled for a full 30 million years. What does 30 million years mean? Human civilization from start to finish has only been about 10,000 years. The Anomalocaris used 30 million years, to turn the entire ocean into its personal hunting ground. But then, something even crazier happened. Its emergence directly changed the course of evolution for the entire Earth. Before the Anomalocaris appeared, ocean creatures had no shells, no claws, and no venom. They had no weapons at all, because there was simply no need. Everyone could just lie flat and be done with it. But after the Anomalocaris arrived, it used its actions to tell all living beings one thing: you are not just living. You are food. As a result, the entire ocean erupted. Trilobites fought to grow hard shells. Mollusks began burrowing into the seabed. Sponges learned to secrete toxins. Even the laziest creatures began to arm themselves frantically. Scientists call this phenomenon the Cambrian explosion. But to put it simply, the appearance of this one species, Anomalocaris, forced all life on Earth onto the fast track of evolution. A single shrimp changed the evolutionary direction of the entire planet. It sounds like science fiction, but this is real history that actually happened. And then, the story began to take a turn. After 30 million years of invincibility, Anomalocaris suddenly disappeared from the fossil record. No natural enemies, no meteors, no volcanoes. It vanished without a trace, as if it had never existed at all. The answer is so ironic it leaves one speechless. 480 million years ago, Earth's climate began a massive shift. Ocean temperatures dropped. Oxygen levels decreased. The seawater became increasingly murky. The entire marine ecosystem began to reshuffle. A new kind of underdog appeared. They were smaller in size, faster, and consumed less energy. They could squeeze into crevices in the reefs where the shrimp couldn't go, and they could work together in groups to hunt large targets. Meanwhile, that top-tier physiological design of the Anomalocaris encountered a fatal problem. Those 28,000 Amatidia, eye facets, couldn't see a single thing clearly in the murky water. The massive predatory appendages couldn't be deployed at all within the narrow reef crevices. A body over a meter long required eating a quarter of its own body weight every day to survive. But prey became scarcer and scarcer, and its body simply could not shrink. Every single advantage that once made it invincible completely flipped after the environment changed. They became the weight that crushed it. It wasn't defeated. In 2022, scientists found the final piece of the puzzle regarding its extinction. Its reproductive strategy had completely collapsed. Anomalocaris needed specific water temperatures to spawn. Climate change made this condition harder and harder to meet. The survival rate of larvae plummeted from 70% to less than 15%. Even if the adults could still hunt, the population could no longer sustain itself. The last of the Anomalocaris vanished completely 430 million years ago. There was no struggle, no resistance. It just quietly exited the stage of history. Today, dozens of distant relatives of the Anomalocaris still live in the ocean. Mantis shrimp, lobsters, and crabs. They all inherited the arthropod structure of the Anomalocaris, but none inherited its extreme configuration. They chose balance. Aggressive but not extreme, defensive but not cumbersome. Able to swim fast, yet also able to hide in rock crevices. These seemingly mediocre choices are exactly what allowed them to survive for 500 million years. They lived until today. So next time you eat lobster, remember one thing. What's in your mouth is the descendant of the first super predator in Earth's history. Its ancestor once looked down upon the entire ocean with 28,000 eye facets, and now it's being dipped in garlic butter and eaten by you. Evolution can truly be a joke sometimes. After the Anomalocaris vanished, the ocean didn't become any safer. It just saw the rise of a new set of killers to fish. Sharks took over. Vertebrates crawled onto land. Dinosaurs ruled for 160 million years, and then they vanished. Every new overlord thinks they are the finish line. Anomalocaris thought so. Dunkleosteus thought so. The dinosaurs thought so. They were all wrong. Sometimes I wonder if any creatures are still alive 500 million years from now, and they dig up our fossils, how will they judge humanity? Will they say the species took only a few thousand years to consume every last resource on Earth and then vanished? A death identical to that of the Anomalocaris, specializing to the extreme and then going extinct. The difference is that the Anomalocaris didn't know what it was doing, but we do. This is a shrimp from 500 million years ago. A suicide note written for everyone today. You think a turtle's shell grows on the outside. Wrong. Those are actually its own ribs. You think a pangolin's scales are bone. Dead wrong. They are made of the same thing as your fingernails. You think armored animals are all great fighters. Completely incorrect. The most heavily armored animals on Earth all ended up starving to death. Of the species on Earth that wore armor, 99% have gone extinct. Today, we are going to talk about one thing. Why is armor the most expensive death warrant? From the birth of the first armored creatures 500 million years ago to trilobites, ankylosaurs, and glyptodonts, every armored overlord followed the same path to dominance, only to be killed by their own armor in the end. And in these 500 million years, there was one creature with armor so thick that bullets couldn't pierce it, yet it still went extinct. It wasn't killed in a fight. It was drowned by a heavy rain. But what you might not know is that the first creatures on Earth to put on armor didn't do it to save their lives. 540 million years ago, during the Cambrian explosion, something suddenly happened on Earth that terrified all soft-bodied animals. The eyes of predators opened for the first time. All creatures just fumbled around blindly. No one was watching anyone else. But one day, a monster called Anomalocaris grew a pair of compound eyes and began to hunt actively. The entire ocean was thrown into chaos. Following that, within just 20 million years, almost all animals began growing armor at the same time. Trilobites grew hard shells. Brachiopods welded on two iron-like plates. Calcareous sponges built limestone skeletons. This was no coincidence. This was an arms race driven by fear. Scientists call this the Cambrian armored event. In plain terms, animals worldwide were frantically competing in defense. But guess what? The first trilobites to put on armor were actually offensive types. Their hard shells were mainly used to support stronger chewing muscles. The goal was to bite harder, not to hide more securely. This is the first irony of armor. The first ones to wear armor were killers, not cowards. Trilobites lived for 270 million years. What does that number actually mean? Human civilization is only 10,000 years old. Trilobites existed 27,000 times longer than we have. To what extent did their armor evolve? Some species had eyes made of calcite crystals. In other words, their eyes were harder than glass and clearer than crystal. These eyes could perceive up, down, left, and right simultaneously, with almost no blind spots. Evolution turned a piece of mineral into a panoramic camera. But even such a perfect creature completely vanished during the Permian-Triassic extinction 252 million years ago. Not a single one was left. What killed it wasn't a stronger predator, but ocean acidification caused by volcanic eruptions. Do you know what acidified seawater meant for trilobites? Their hard shells were made of calcium carbonate. Acidic seawater directly dissolves calcium carbonate. This means trilobites were backstabbed by their own armor. As the ocean turned acidic, their shells began to dissolve, from the outside in, corroding them to death while they were alive. This is the second irony of armor. You think armor protects you, but it is also your Achilles heel. Fast forward to 300 million years ago, the Carboniferous period. Insects on land at this time held a winning hand. Atmospheric oxygen levels reached 35%. Today it is 21%. In the Carboniferous, it was a full 2/3 higher. What does high oxygen mean? It meant the bodies of all insects could enlarge indefinitely. Dragonflies had wingspans of 70 centimeters. Millipedes were 2.7 meters long. Scorpions were the size of dogs. Centipedes were thicker than your arm. But here is a detail you don't know. These giant insects had no lungs. They relied on tracheal tubes to breathe oxygen directly. The larger the body, the longer the tracheal tubes, and the lower the transport efficiency. A high oxygen environment was like a cheat code. Gave them a body size that exceeded natural limits. And their exoskeletons, which are also a type of armor, were simply a byproduct of this cheat code. The larger the body, the thicker the shell needed for support. The thicker the shell, the more oxygen required to maintain metabolism. When the Carboniferous period ended, oxygen levels plummeted. The exoskeletons of these giant insects suddenly became a fatal burden, too heavy, too oxygen demanding, and too hard to molt. They slowly suffocated inside their own armor. The third irony of armor appeared. Armor was wings during prosperity, but in times of decline, it became shackles. Fast forward to 100 million years ago, the Cretaceous, the most frenzied era in the evolutionary history of armor. Predators became stronger, so prey piled their armor even thicker. Just how thick? First, a fun fact. You might think the Triceratops' horns were weapons. Wrong. Scientists have discovered that those 3 horns and the massive neck frill primarily function as a display. It was a deterrent saying, "Look closely, don't mess with me." This was the first time in evolutionary history that armor was used for socializing. But the one who truly pushed defense to the extreme was the Nodosaurus. The Nodosaurus is a close relative of the Ankylosaurus, but it had no tail club. Its armor possessed no offensive weapons at all. On its neck, back, and sides, it was entirely embedded with bony spikes. Some spikes were up to 45 centimeters long, making it look like a mobile fortress covered in spears. It had only one strategy: lie flat and stay still so you can't bite through it. Flip it over or eat it. In 2017, Canadian scientists unearthed a Nodosaurus fossil. Its state of preservation shocked the entire paleontological world. The skin was intact, the bone plates were original, and even the color of the scales remained. This creature from 110 million years ago looked like it had only been dead for a week. Looking at the fossil, scientists said, "This is the most perfect dinosaur I have ever seen, but as perfect as it was, it still went extinct." Then there was the Ankylosaurus, the ultimate form of armored dinosaurs. Its skull was solid, and it even grew bone on its eyelids. Bony plates layered over its entire body, forming an impenetrable mesh of armor. At the end of its tail was a bone club 40 centimeters in diameter and weighing 30 kilograms. Scientists calculated that a single strike had enough force to shatter a T-Rex's leg bone. A T-Rex would actively avoid an adult Ankylosaurus. This isn't speculation. It's a conclusion scientists drew based on footprint fossils. By the late Cretaceous, armor had reached its absolute peak in its 500 million year history. But the other side of a peak is a cliff. 66 million years ago, an asteroid hit the Earth. A nuclear winter descended. Plants died out, and the food chain collapsed. The Ankylosaurus's armor was too heavy. It moved too slowly to migrate long distances for food. Its metabolic rate was also high. It would starve to death after a few weeks without food. That most perfect Nodosaurus, the Ankylosaurus, and their nemesis, the T-Rex, all vanished in the same catastrophe. Cretaceous armor was the most brilliant masterpiece in evolutionary history, and also the page that was wiped cleanest. Time moves to 2.5 million years ago, the Pleistocene Ice Age. The Earth entered a long cycle of repeated freezing and thawing. At the peak of the glaciation, 1/3 of the land in the northern hemisphere was buried under ice. Those who survived were tough characters who could withstand extreme environments. It was during this era that armored evolutionary history reached its mammalian peak. First, let's talk about the Glyptodon. Its ancestor was just a small ant-eating creature, but evolution transformed it into a nearly 2-ton armored tank. It had a solid dome bony shell on its back, looking like a Volkswagen Beetle turned upside down on the ground. The end of its tail was encased in bony rings, and the structure of these rings was extremely rigid. At the tip was a bony club covered in spikes. Have you noticed? This configuration is almost identical to the Ankylosaurus from the Cretaceous period. The domed armor and the bony club tail. A low-slung body shape evolved using completely different materials, in a completely different era, creating almost the exact same tank. Scientists call this convergent evolution. Different organisms facing the same pressures, independently finding the same answer. What were the Glyptodon's rivals? Saber-toothed tigers, giant short-faced bears, dire wolves. These were the most ferocious mammalian hunters of the Pleistocene. But not a single tooth could bite through the Glyptodon's shell. It roamed South America just like that, surviving for nearly 20 million years. But there was another armored animal in the Pleistocene. More low-key, yet more miraculous. The Megatherium, giant ground sloth. You might not have heard this name. It wasn't a typical armored creature, but scientists in its fossilized skin discovered dense bony nodules embedded under the skin. Not an outer shell, but osteoderms within the skin. Bones growing inside the flesh, forming a flexible layer of built-in armor. If you stabbed it, it wouldn't feel like stabbing meat, but rather like stabbing a bag of crushed gravel. The Megatherium stood nearly 6 meters tall, weighing over 3 tons. Even a saber-toothed tiger wouldn't dare confront it head-on. Even more terrifying, its claws were 50 centimeters long. Defense and offense were both maxed out. So the armor of the Pleistocene wasn't just a hard shell, but rather the same problem that evolution repeatedly tried to solve across different species. How to make a moving body of flesh. Impossible to tear open. But the Pleistocene ended. The Ice Age ended. The Glyptodon went extinct. The Megatherium went extinct. The saber-toothed tiger went extinct. This time there was no asteroid, no volcano. It was humans who arrived. Fossil evidence shows early humans not only hunted Glyptodons, but also used their shells as tents. A full-grown adult could crawl inside to sleep. Humans discovered the ultimate exploit. No need to bite through it. Just flip it over. Once a Glyptodon is flipped, with its limbs in the air, it simply cannot get back up. It can only wait for death. The armored legion of the Pleistocene was thus sent into the extinction list by an unarmored animal, using wisdom and tools. Now you might be thinking, has armor ever truly won? Yes, once. 66 million years ago. An asteroid struck the Earth. Fire, extreme temperatures, nuclear winter. Birds and dinosaurs all went extinct. But one animal survived, the turtle. A turtle shell is formed by its own ribs and vertebrae turning outward. It didn't just grow a shell. Rather, its entire skeleton was dismantled and reorganized, flipped to the outside of the body. Evolution spent 50 million years building this shell. Fossils of those intermediate stages show ribs flattened and spread out, but not yet closed. The back arched, but the shell hadn't fully formed. Those unfinished products lived in extreme agony, slow-moving and without complete protection. But the turtle endured. It outlived the dinosaurs. It outlived the Ice Age. It lived to this day, becoming the most successful armored creature on Earth. But do you know what it relied on to win? It wasn't about how hard the shell was. It was because its metabolism was low to the extreme. When a turtle hibernates, its heart beats only twice per minute. It can go for months without eating. During the nuclear winter after the asteroid impact, plants died out. The food chain collapsed. Most creatures starved to death. But the turtle just lay there, doing nothing, and simply held on. The true secret of armor has never been hardness. It is the survival strategy that matches the armor. Every armored animal found the perfect answer at some point, and then clung to that answer, unwilling to ever let go. They didn't lose to natural predators. They lost to the way they once won. Have you ever wondered how much of a person's life is lived behind an invisible suit of armor? Relying on a certain identity, a certain obsession, or a certain idea of this is the kind of person I am, wrapping yourself up so tightly, thinking that it's protection, without knowing that it is the very thing trapping you. 500 million years of evolution prove only one thing. The most dangerous thing isn't having no armor. It's mistaking the armor for yourself. Because from that day on, what you are protecting is no longer life, but rather that self you are afraid to let go of.